Hey, we're back for another edition here of breaking down some sets here, man. We're breaking down the first virtual set. Who came up with the name Break the Walls Down?
That was something that was discussed already. Part of the reason for it is the time that it came out. In fact, the time that it came out, it wasn't even called Virtual 1. It was called Revolution 4. Part of that was to pick up where Comic Images left off. Mike Foley had talked about how in Revolution 4, there was finally going to be some superstar support because every set up to that had been very standalone in the structure of the superstar specifics. It was only for the guys in that set. There were no support cards added in on the back end, but that we would finally start to see that in Revolution 4. There was talk of having a couple of superstars in there, like Revolution The Rock. And one of the things, and this was so sad to see, he had just posted that we'll probably have to look at some guys like maybe Revolution Chris Benoit. And that was like days before everything went down and all of the tragedy that happened with Chris Benoit. And it was like, maybe not, maybe not that guy. Yeah, I don't know. We're not going to do that. But there was talk about where the set would go next. And then suddenly Comic Images came out and said, nope, we're done. Good night, everybody. And that was that. So in the process of forming the ideas that what if we do a set of our own now that Comic Images is out, now that, you know, Baron has alas left us and Mike is washing his hands of making anything more. Once we realized this was a possibility to continue the game online in a fantasy card type environment, but make it a continuation of the game, one of our major goals was to help bridge the gap between Classic and Revolution, because now we've sort of moved away from the all access focus because it's just too much, and the players have responded, no, we'd rather play A or B, not A and B together. It's just too much. But at the time, it was very much in an integrated sense of trying to help merge the sets together. So you saw a lot of the cards in the set that I'm sure we'll get into later, where we were crossing over between moves that might have, like all of the moves Nate made, which I'm sure we'll get into later as well. Things like a whirlwind kick, where it was a strike and an assault. You had
You even had cards that were, an action and an antic.
Yes, turn the match around.
Yeah.
Since we've already got to that point, I'm just going to bring it up. Nate had the brilliant idea to have one of each. And there's a joke that I don't know that anybody's caught to this day. And the joke is that all 4 of those cards have something in the title about turning or spinning, because they all relate to a revolution.
Oh.
And nobody's ever got that joke that we planted 12 years ago or whatever.
Maybe it just wasn't that funny of a joke.
Oh,
Fuck you
harsh.
too.
So back to your question, the idea was to try to help break the walls down. One of the major complaints we heard with Revolution was, okay, that's great, you're pushing all this new stuff, but what about those of us who wanted more of the classic game? What about those who just want to play classic? So we wanted to introduce what was intended to be a final set, to say, okay, here's more stuff for classic to open the doors for later play. Here's more stuff for Revolution. And here's some stuff if you want to do both. It'll help break the walls down between them. And in the process, we also had another Jericho remake. So it all kind of tied together and fit on multiple levels.
Was the intention to actually have introduced new superstars, or just to close out all the stuff that was currently produced?
Both.
Oh.
When we started talking beyond the possibility of, hey, it'd be cool to have a couple more cards, the idea was we should also make a couple people who either A, haven't been approved by WWE, because back then they were not okay with Randy Savage or Ultimate Warrior
or Bret
Hart. Exactly. And Owen Hart, forget it. No.
Yeah.
Nope.
So there was no possibility that those would ever see the light of day under the Comic Images banner. because of WWE approval. So we said, well, why don't we put them out? And we can try to assemble pictures or whatever and get some of these guys in, along with a few of the more interesting recent talent that were all on hold because, excuse me, because Revolution basically went back through the existing names. And other than Umaga and Kali, we didn't see any new talent in the Revolution starters. Of course, we saw some ECW guys in the promos, but
Sure.
there was no new talent for a year that came into the game. We were just rehashing through the big names again. So we thought, well, what about these guys who are coming out and making an impact, like MVP, like Molina?
CM Punk.
CM Punk, absolutely. Yeah. Because he had gone from just being, that one guy at ECW who's pretty cool, to having such an impact already. And he was known by a lot of people for his ROH work. Yeah. So there were a lot of fans that wanted to see him in the game. So we were glad to be able to add him somehow.
Awesome. When did the development start? Like, how soon after Comic Images was no longer producing? How long did it take before you guys started to say, hey, you know what, we're going to do something with this?
It took a few months.
Yeah, I think around 6 months.
Yeah, because initially, I don't know about Nate, but for myself, I was kind of sitting back and waiting to see what came next. Who was going to pick it up and run with it? And nobody really did. Bryson, I'll let you try to pronounce his name, Nate, because I'll probably get Yizik. Thank you. Bryson's a great guy, but I swear his name looks like somebody dropped a bunch of Scrabble tiles and just said, that's it, that's a name.
No disrespect.
No disrespect at all. Great guy. When he started his direction, he was working on something called New Raw Deal. And the idea was to go back to the originals and have some of the big names, but also have some of the newer names like Kennedy, Cena, and sort of recreate it from the ground up. And there were some good things and there were some not so good things about it. Part of it was the obvious flaw of a player who says, okay, I have a stack of cards and you're telling me I can't use them. In some cases, there were some cards that were directly ported over, but in others, they were renamed, or this card did the same thing as this, but it had a different name for whatever reason. And people just didn't quite click with it. It wasn't bad. And there were some very cool things about it. Like he adopted a premise from one of the Raw versus SmackDown games where you would pick two styles, I think they were called. Yeah. So you could be like brawler and showman. And you would see a card that was like, punch. If you're a brawler, this card gets an extra effect. And then each of those style cards had their own little perks and benefits built into them.
Right. They were like proto backstage cards.
Yeah, basically. And you could switch up and adapt. So you could have a John Cena brawler showman type deck or whatever.
But I might have a John Cena that's grappler technician.
Yeah.
And they would play differently while still being the same guy.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds interesting. I saw those posts and that, when they first started doing it and going on and on and on, but I don't want to get involved in something new like that, but it sounds interesting.
It wasn't a bad
cool
premise.
Concept.
Yeah. People just weren't that interested in getting reinvested on a ground floor again, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So I had some ideas for cards. I suggested to Mike while we were still in print that the Marine Taunt card for Cena could be fun because once you drop Kill a Beat, it's so limiting. Granted, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but I always thought it'd be nice to have a different taunt card to play, but also to have other taunt cards that other people could play, because Taunt the Fans is only good if you're a heel deck. If you're a face deck or a bash deck, what are you going to do against Kill the Beat? And it was such an environment-changing card once it hit the table that I was always disappointed there weren't more options for it. That mentality is something that we built around later, that why aren't there more of X? And I'll get into that later. But so you have these ideas that are being mulled around. And I thought about the Dudley Boys and how what they really just needed was a way to get one shot on the table. If they could just get one shot on a table, then they could kind of be a little more competitive. They had a card like that. So you had these individual ideas, and it occurred to me, like, what if we just built up a whole set, like made one card for everybody? And somehow I got the connection that instead of waiting for somebody to do something and we would just, be support staff for them, what if I did it? What if we did it? What if I got Nate and some of the old play testers, and what if we just did it ourselves?
Yeah.
And realizing that we could do this, it became, okay, well, if we're going to do this, let's lay out some concepts that we're going to work with. Like, let's give everybody one card, every superstar. We actually didn't do that because there were a couple of remakes. Like, we didn't give the People's Champ or Highlight of the Night a card because we made a Rock remake, because we made a Jericho remake. So that got left behind. And the individual Spirit Squad guys didn't get a card. But we came back around in Virtual 3 and I found enough pictures, and I had to put some research in because honestly, I couldn't really tell them apart. So I had to sit there and look at a picture.
You knew who Johnny was, and you knew who Kenny was.
Right, they stuck around.
At that
but the
time,
other three,
I don't know if you knew who Mikey was.
Yeah, Ziggler. Nikki Ziggler. I could kind of pick him out of a lineup, but some of those others, I would have to like look at the picture and then look at the superstar cards. Ah, okay, that's Mitch. Okay, cool, got it.
Fuck Mitch.
So what ended up happening to him?
Yeah, so the general idea was, well, let's give everybody one card. So guys like Jamie Noble, who haven't been around for a long time, they'll get something. Guys like Road Dogg, they can get something. And later that became, you know what, we've got Road Dogg, we've got Billy Gunn. Why the hell don't we have New Age Outlaws? And we know why. It's because Road Dogg, almost immediately after being put into Raw Deal, left the WWE and was never around long enough to be into any set to get a support card.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
He'd come back, okay, we'll make a card for it, and there it goes, never mind.
And it's gone.
Pretty much. So make a card for everybody. And then it became, well, what if we made some new superstars of our own for the guys that we couldn't get through comic images? And along the way, well, if we're going to do that, we ought to put a few more cards out so it's not just here's new superstar and superstar support, but it feels like a set. Mm-hmm. And in that, we tried to focus on some concepts that we wanted to accomplish, besides breaking the walls between the different game styles. Also to bring things into the game that felt like they were lacking. One of those ideas was NWO.
Yes.
There was a rumor, and I've never seen this confirmed. Excuse me. But the rumor was there was going to be an NWO t-shirt card at some point, and that just never came to fruition. Like, when the NWO came in, it was like, okay, great, we can get them in Raw Deal now. Because there was no chance of making anything WCW, but once they came in the WWE, fair game, all right. But the timing was really weird with SummerSlam because they started sketching out what they wanted to do, and it was going to be all NWO, and then suddenly things started breaking up, and Hogan was taking off as a face, so they pulled him away from the group. And it was Hall and Nash, but then Hall got injured or was set aside. I don't remember the history exactly. Anybody can look this up on the internet anyway. So then they started bringing in odd people like Shawn Michaels and Booker T, and then they just said, okay, forget this. The NWO is gone. So it was like, well, great. Okay, so Hogan, we're going to have to make him non-NWO Hogan. We'll have Hall and Nash. We've got this X-Pac card, and that's it.
And lethal NWO Poison.
Huh?
And lethal NWO Poison.
Yeah. And that was the extent that we had for the NWO. And it always felt like there should have been a little more presence in there. But the obvious question became, well, if you just have a card called NWO T-shirt, and if you give those NWO guys some perks, why wouldn't everybody join NWO? So we wanted to make it in a way that said, okay, you can, but it's going to cost you. You have to sacrifice something because you can't just join up. So that's
where we had one up over WCW booking.
Yeah. Where the NWO T-shirt had a kind of sharp downside, and it really didn't see much play. it wasn't until Virtual 3 when we introduced the allegiances and said, oh, here's why. Because you might want to join NWO, but you might want to work for Vince, or you might want to be about Raw or SmackDown or WCW or Saturday Night's Main Event.
Or just going for yourself.
Yeah. I have no allegiance, just a me. But back in Revolution 4,
yes,
it was one of those things about, we have a concept, and how do we execute that not only in a way that feels more authentic to gameplay, but is also balanced in what do you have to give up if you're getting this. And as I mentioned on the previous thing, we wanted to bring the table, ladder, and chairs in. Well, I did, definitely. I just didn't like the way they worked as just actions, because you could hit somebody with a chair, and then you could, DDT or pedigree somebody onto that chair. The one thing we wanted to watch out for was, I heard a story about WCW Nitro, how you could do Brett Sharpshooter through a table.
Through a table.
Yeah, I can't make that work in my head. So we said, all right, well, let's make sure they don't work with trademark finishers with maintain in the title. So you can't, cross-face somebody into a chair, which could work.
That's the one that would actually kind of work. Walls of Jericho through a ladder. Yeah, no, didn't do that.
On a ladder through, I don't know. A few times there were ideas that didn't necessarily need to be done, but this was our first go. We didn't know what was too silly or too self-indulgent to be worth doing or not doing. A good example.
And we weren't really thinking about it as this is setting up to something bigger. We were just doing it to do it as a way to bookend the game.
True, very true. When they made Chris Masters, or didn't make Chris Masters as it is, but when they made the promo card, there was some talk about, instead of saying search for maintain hold, let's say search for a card with maintain in the title in case we ever make something else.
D2 says, by the way, he says that that Hall left because of his demons. He was released.
Oh, yes.
And that Walls of Jericho did happen on top of a ladder, technically.
Wasn't that when Orton did his failed RKO?
Which failed RKO?
There's an infamous one where he runs by Jericho.
The one where he runs and then slips and just
he has to go around and do it again to actually get him. Yeah.
I believe that's correct.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, so that idea of Chris Masters being able to search for any card with maintain the title, we said, well, why don't we make another maintain card for him to fetch besides just maintain hold? Or the weird scenario where you're fetching Revolution maintain the hold, for which he would need submissions and holds in his deck to play follow-up cards that you probably won't actually, never mind. It was just...
You're making my head hurt.
It did. And it was a neat idea, but it isn't necessarily something we needed to do.
So let's dial it back a little bit here, like that.
Sure.
So you wait about 6 months after Comic Images is done. Just kind of sit back and see what's happening. When did you two start actually talking? You know what? Let's do something ourselves. Like about 6 months afterwards, that you're saying? And was the thought process just to let's just kind of give everybody a support card, or what came first in the process?
I think it started with the support cards idea.
That sounds right.
And I remember the last tournament I held at Game HQ in Oklahoma City. We knew it was going to be basically a farewell to Raw deal because they had already announced the game had ended in 2007.
Yep.
And we had we would usually do one big tournament, with multiple individual tournaments in it, but we'd have a big day after a set released, and I'd see a bunch of the guys from Texas come up. And we'd already done that for Revolution 3. Amusingly, I went 1 and 2 in the main tournament, and I rarely, I can count them on one hand without using my thumb, would have a losing tournament record. So 1 and 2, I remember going, wow, that's like the sign of the apocalypse or something. I actually had a losing record for the first time in years. It's like, what, is the game going to end or something? Comic Images is now announcing, oh man.
So it's your fault.
Didn't they announce on Pearl Harbor Day?
Probably.
something awful like that.
Yeah.
But anyway, so we have a tournament.
We all got Pearl Harbored that day.
Right.
Yeah.
We have a tournament in 2008. I did the Ides of March, and I remember talking about the idea. So it was present shortly after that, because I think Bryson had started talking about New Raw Deal, and we started realizing after Baron was gone that there's not going to be more Raw Deal printed. As much as he wanted to believe, Mike had always had the stance of, yep, it's done, we're done. But Baron was the one who was like, no, maybe we can find another way, maybe we can find another deal. I'm still looking. And then we lost Baron on Leap Day, 2008.
Yeah.
Rest in peace, big guy. So these ideas were still floating around in my head. And I talked to some of the guys after this big, like, let's help the game shop move some of the last of the product they have. So we did like a big, massive sealed deck. He gave us a great deal on the stuff that was left. And I said afterwards, once we finished, what would you think if there was like a fantasy set to close out the game? We could get like Bret Hart, he could have to do something with technical moves and precision because he was always precise and technical. Like, yeah, okay. So we spit out some ideas and just brainstormed a few things. I think we mentioned Ultimate Warrior. Like, what would he do? I don't know. He just kind of did basic stuff. Well, what about back to basics? What if he just was just a really good back to basics guy? So we threw out a couple ideas that I sort of filed away. When I started assembling all of this, pulled up everything we thought about. And I got hold of Nate and said, what if we do this? Then we got to the interesting point where we had formed sort of an outline. I still have documents I was looking at where I have like every superstar's name. And there's some blank slots in some places because we had no idea. What does Goldust need? I don't know.
A miracle?
Yeah. Is anybody still playing him? He used to be devastating, but that was, 6 sets ago.
Yeah, that was Velocity.
What does this guy need? What does that person need? And in a lot of cases, it was mostly fixer cards. Like, okay, when this card first came out in, I don't know, Mania or Velocity, it might have been too good. So they say, oh, you can only play this if you have this. But now the game is so wide open, volley this exists. Now we need to say, okay, to make this card playable, let's change it to, well, instead of you can only play A if you have B, well, you can't reverse A if you have B. And now this card is more playable, and thus the superstars are a little easier to use. But then it became a question of who was going to handle the graphics. And I'd seen some people who had done some nice like proxies and fantasy cards. So I figured, okay, I'll see who steps up. I'll look over their work, and if it sounds good, I'll work with them. And the crowd went silent. Nobody stepped up and said, yeah, I want to. I thought sure somebody would be like, hey man, I've done some little, I don't know, a Mickey Mouse superstar or something. I've done something, but hey, I want to throw my hat in and be part of this. And nobody did. I was truly shocked by that. And I looked around and said, well, somebody's got to do it. I guess it's going to be me.
So you're already designing. You're already trying to figure out things out. Now you're going to be, doing graphics too.
Mm-hmm. So I started looking at my options, and I settled on GIMP since I didn't have Photoshop at the time. I still don't. And I just started doing one thing at a time, using terrible scans. If anybody's ever seen the original R4 cards, they're terrible, low quality, picture quality is awful. Yeah.
They were rough, but
it got the job done.
Yeah, it sure did. I tell you, when I first started bringing that to the local area in SoCal, man, they were completely unaware of this topic going on TCO when it first became known. And so I would use them as prize support for people coming to play. It's like that. Like, holy shit, where'd you get Bret Hart? This is awesome. Did you make these? No, I didn't make these. Where'd you get them? I'm not going to tell you.
But that sort of led to, okay, we can do this. This could actually happen. So we just built on it from there, took a lot of suggestions. Once we got to a point where we were at a sort of past between an alpha and a beta stage, I would say, in development, I said, well, let's do this openly. Let's just put it all out there, talk about what we've got going on, and get some input from people. And some people were not as sharp with the level of skill that was required to have a good assessment of things. And that's always going to be the case because
Playtesting is a different skill set than playing.
It really is. There's a lot of people who say, you know, man, this is great. I can build a deck with it. And then there's other people who can look at it more analytically and say, this is great, but this needs to be toned down a little bit more if you want this on par with existing superstars. If you want to raise the power creep, fine, but it really should be here if you want to try to keep things on an even level. Then we started looking at not just can we put out new content, but what can we do for the game? What can we do to help balance things? So then we got into the subject of enough shenanigans. Let's try to trim the edges off the decks that were automatic and classic, Piper, Andre, Kennedy. Let's tone those guys down a bit so they're more balanced.
So you can actually have a back and forth game instead of
Right.
just I show up with Kennedy and you lose.
Which is, you know, another topic all by itself because people were so pissed about that. You totally neutered my Kennedy. You totally neutered my Piper deck, you know.
Sure did. I'm mad about it.
Yeah.
Yep. A certain gentleman, whose name I won't mention, but has been interviewed on your show, was quite vocal about his favorite Piper deck being toned down. So much so that instead of just being another blank guy, he actually insisted we should give him something back. And so Rowdy Roddy Piper, instead of being blanked, just got a different ability. And we gave him something to give him a direction. And that's back to basics. Build him up. So, okay, you know, Piper was another one of those classic guys who did a lot of the basic moves. He wasn't an innovative offense kind of guy. He was just a great personality. So we enhanced his back to basics play.
You've been given some kudos here on the board, Mr. Creed here. D2 says that hashtag Creed, the graphic goat.
That did become something over time where I tried to challenge myself because I didn't want the cards to just look like they did when they first came out. I just didn't know how to do it better. Yeah. And actually, credit to Bryson, he never told me where he got them, but somebody gave him some high quality card skin and he shared them with me. It was like a technical shoot and some, maybe a panic move or something. And it took me a long time, but I spent the time to scrub the text off and carefully use other pieces of the texture and blending to try to remove the lettering and get rid of the picture and get rid of everything that was there to try to make a blank template that we could go forward from and eventually come back to that first set and rework every single card in it while also producing new content. So yeah, there was a lot of work. That's why people would say, well, I don't see why you don't just, you have no idea how much time is really going into this.
Yeah, I know.
Or when people say, you know, I want to make a Mickey Mouse superstar, give me your templates. No.
Yeah. That's funny.
Yeah.
So we go from, now you're designing new superstars in addition to trying to close out, as you said, bookend, you know, the previous stuff like that. Who was the first new superstar that you guys developed?
Brett was one of the first ones we talked about just because he was so obvious, probably the biggest name. And unfortunately, this is one of my few true regrets that I'm trying to figure out how to put this exactly. As I mentioned, we had the idea of technical and precision, and those familiar with Bret Hart in the game have seen how that played out. Once we kind of set down that path, I was told about something I was not aware of, which was in the original stages of Great American Bash, there was actually a Bret Hart design. And rather than try to make all his moves, because they only had the 5-card sets back then with starter decks, he had a 5 moves of Doom card that had to do with playing those moves, the Russian leg sweep, the sharpshooter, and so on. I'd have to dig it out. But where I'm going with this is, rather than saying, wait, let's abandon that idea and let's go with what Comic Images had in mind, I said, no. We've already got a Bret Hart. So we tried to change that concept into Owen Hart. And if I had it to do over again, I really should have said, okay, you know what? Let's go with the CI idea for Bret Hart, and let's use the Bret Hart idea for Owen Hart instead. Because trying to adapt the one to Owen's offense just didn't play out well. And holy cow, Bret Hart move pictures are so freaking hard to find. So anybody who's looked at his moves and go, that's a terrible picture of a Russian leg sweep. I have never seen a Bret Hart Russian leg sweep picture in my life.
Well, why don't you just do a DVD screen capture?
No.
Because it looks like shit.
Because it looks like I took a photograph of my television set. No. Have you ever seen that on a raw deal card? No, you have not. And I am not going to be the one to put it there. So in very rare cases, when we absolutely could not find anything whatsoever, like Owen Hart's Tombstone Pile Driver is actually a capture, and it's about the only one I know of for sure. Because we just said, no, we are going to have standards. We are going to do better. We're not just going to be basic fantasy cards with these blurry images.
Yep.
Because I'd seen that done. One of my inspirations was Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Mm-hmm.
They ran for 3 sets and a little like holiday set equivalent that were based around the first 3 seasons. And they had a players committee who said, wait, nobody's picking this up, but there's so much more of the show that we would like to enjoy in the game. So I looked at that as a model for how to go forward. And unfortunately, a lot of their images were TV captures or DVD captures that were blurred, or they just didn't have the quality of the film, regardless of what technology they used to capture it. You're hitting pause on a DVD. You can only get such good quality because of the source material. So I didn't want to look like that. I wanted to rely more, because we had this wealth of pictures from WWE.com. Well, let's use that. Let's rely on that. And that's where we saw a lot of the pictures that I might have pulled from Google or whatnot for that first set. When we redid it all and remastered it with the new templates, I tried to push to have better images across the board. Hurricane comes to mind. There's a great picture of Greg Helms walking backstage and just this random collection of backstage photos that happened to show up. And I said, hey, there we go. Keeping his identity a secret. Okay, well, let's show him without the mask. And I managed to come up with a way to overlay a hurricane head shot up in the corner just to give it a little more interest. But we definitely said we want the graphics to have standards and look like raw deal cards. So yeah, no DVD captures, no TV shots. No. We are so fortunate that if we wanted to continue a Magic type game, Warlord comes to mind, just because I haven't played that many CCGs on the whole. But
I don't know. You got a D20 handy? We can play some Warlord. That's a whole side conversation that we don't need to have right now.
The TLDR version is the game's structure was amazing. I liked it a lot, but it's basically D&D. Everything you do, you roll a dice for. If my guy's going to attack your guy, I have to roll a dice to see if I hit, and dice hated me.
I don't know why you're using the past tense there. They continue to hate you.
Probably true. Luck has never been my friend. But so anyway, if you want to continue Warlord, if you want to continue a Magic type game, if you want to continue any of these, you need art.
Yep.
Or you need to have crappy quality TV captures. We are so fortunate that the WWE is a source media that gives us new material, not as often as we would have liked in the mid 2000s, but
almost daily now.
Oh yeah, now, wow. With Raw, SmackDown, NXT, NXT UK, there's so much going on that you can always find something to build around.
Yep.
And not just have to resort to the nostalgia. But yeah.
Let's go to now. So you guys are developing new superstars. You're trying to close out existing superstars. Now you're also developing non-superstar specific cards as well. let's talk a little bit about those and how those became about. Why did you choose what you chose for that set?
We wanted to bring in the aggression rule. Well, I did. I don't know about anybody else. But we wanted to bring that aggression rule over from Revolution, mostly because of the crossover factor.
Mm-hmm.
There were antics that said, basically, when you burn cards for not playing a maneuver, burn half. Or when you burn, pick a maneuver up. And I thought, well, if we have that premise in All Access, then those antics will have more use because they were good, but they didn't necessarily make the cut in a lot of Revolution decks. So having it in a more broad range would give more possibilities for the game. Also, we saw a distinct downturn in the game with Diva's Overload because so many people were put off by these action combo decks. And we talked about this before, you know, instead of having a wrestling match, you're seeing guys go into the ring, basically doing the equivalent of talking, pulling out a table and doing one move, and that's the whole match. You know, nobody wants to see a match like that. It's a wrestling game. It should be about wrestling. Mm-hmm. So having old school wrestling match brought that rule in to All Access in a way, and Classic, that enabled people to say, you know what? I'm not going to sit around and let you just combo me. Bring it. Come on, let's fight. Let's throw some moves. Let's throw down. So not everybody liked it. Some people were quite put off by that, especially because it's RMS. So you can't just, well, I'll just blank that stipulation I don't like.
Yeah.
One of the other things we looked at was there was an approach to backlash decks that it was almost a privilege to get them. Like, you're lucky to be able to play any pre-match cards. And we wanted to see that as more of a right. So it's all about the game. Let's just shut that down. Originally, we came with My Game My Way as a way to recover from that. Like, okay, you've lost your pre-match cards, but hey, I'll play My Game My Way. I'll get my mids back, so I'm not having to just rely on a touch turnbuckle or some random thing. Mm-hmm. Hardcore style, yeah, ooh, +1 to my moves, okay, great. And expanding the pre-match was definitely not by raising the limits and raising the number of cards. That came later. But the problem with corruption is it works even when it doesn't. So I have 10 slots in my deck. I have to worry that you might be playing Calling You Out, Old School, US Title, and then Switcheroo. So I need to pack some defensive cards against that. I might have to play them. That's less cards that I can commit to the strategy I want to use and any sort of toolbox that I might want for something else. So if I'm toolboxing against pre-match corruption, first off, that's taking my pre-match slots to use the U-Rang, to use the whatever to increase my pre-match slots. I have to pack all of that in addition to maybe this card to stop Hell in a Cell. When the heck am I going to have time to play my own cards? You have strategies like Man of 1,000 Holds. Well, that requires a 4-card commitment. Who the heck can afford to play that if they're worried about losing all their pre-match and have to pack defensive cards? And it just seemed like there were so many possibilities, and by forcing everybody into either a corruption or anti-corruption strategy, it really limited what people could do creatively and more of the options they could come up with. I can't count the number of times I sat down with a deck that said, okay, my strategy requires me to do A, B, C, D in the pre-match. Nope, they're running Calling You Out, Old School. Okay, well, I guess I'm back to just throwing random moves and hoping they stick. And I really thought that it hampered the game, and it limited things and reduced creativity. And I know some people live and die by their ability to corrupt things. Certain people you've had on your show that feel like, well, if I can't shut my opponent down, I don't know what they're doing in virtual. Like, we're allowing people to play cards. You know, yes, it's more of a everybody plays everything type environment, but at the same time, that enables people to come up with more strategy, and it makes for a richer game rather than I stop you from doing anything. I've told this story at least once, but one of the worst experiences I saw in Raw Deal, I inflicted on somebody. Joe Stenpeck had this Kennedy deck. First of all, Kennedy. And it was very good. I ran it at a tournament, and I think it went like 2-1, 3-1, something like that. just a bad matchup with Hulk Hogan of all people. Um,
Who
but
hasn't?
it was pretty random. He could use his ability to burn and get moves, which he was throwing the Revolution moves at the time. He still got his 2 Hogan pre-match. And then when I played some sort of like a shoot lockup or something, he just feather boa and reversed it.
Yep.
It was just a bad luck game. But that's okay, because it was a hideous deck. So it deserved to have some bad luck. Because Kennedy would do his thing, shut you out of pre-match, and then play his cards. So the one guy I played had no cards he could play against that. He didn't get a turn, and he actually had to skip a turn through, I think it was like one of the McMahon pre-match cards or something. I don't remember exactly how it went down. But so he not only didn't get a turn, he wouldn't have gotten another turn, and I one-turned it. And I was like, okay, that's cute, but that's pretty lousy on the other side of it. And I
Yeah,
really
who would want
wanted
to play against that?
Right. I really wanted to do what I could to try to make that less of a threat, to try to make it where people could actually play the game and were less likely to get shut out. I wanted it to be as interactive as it used to be. So that was a hard sell for a lot of the players who were kind of stuck in that mindset of, but I built this deck, I should be able to play it. I should be able to kill you dead in one turn. Why can't I do that? Like, no, that's not really a game. And that's something I wanted to get back to, is to make it an actual interactive game between both players and get more of the deeper strategies and more of the subtle points rather than just, I shut down your pre-match, I do whatever I want, I win. Lol.
That's never fun. Nobody likes to have an MPE experience.
Right.
So you're spending all this time, you're developing, you're doing graphic designs like that. Nate, where were you? Why are you not helping this man?
Okay,
No.
hold on.
No.
I cannot tell you how many times I was like, all right, you're doing all this shit. Just tell me how to put these cards together, and I've got GIMP. I can do this. And the problem there is that, one, and Christopher, I love you, but when he has a thought in his mind, he's just going to do it. Him teaching me how to do it would take as much time as him just doing it, so he's just going to do it. Two,
That's very bad tech support, buddy. Very, very bad tech support.
hey, for two, he also has a unified vision in his head, and sometimes you can't actually communicate that to someone else because you don't know how to communicate the assumptions that you already have. So I did things that I could do to be support to the whole virtual process. And what I did was I designed a few cards, and I troubleshot a lot of cards to make sure they worked.
We also did some playtesting, as I recall, back and forth. Hey,
Yep,
let's give this
you
a
and
spin.
I
Let's see how
sat
it
down
goes.
and did a lot of playtesting.
And yeah, by no means am I saying, I did all this stuff and Nate told me, good job, man. That was his part. No, Nate was very interactive because anything I did, I was filtering through him, both for the rules, because I said, well, people are asking me these rules questions. You know what? You know all about the rules. You're the rules guy now. I hand you the hat. I've got enough hats to wear. Thanks.
I'm just busting your balls, Nate.
I
really
know.
am. But I'm just, it sounds like it's just, is there anybody else helping you guys when this stuff was started? Is it just you two guys doing this, or who was the original team to help out?
Probably, I leaned a lot on people I knew who either had been playtesters before, some of which were done. I talked to Jason Griffey, and when Baron passed, that took his interest with Raw Deal with it. He said,
Yeah,
just
that hit
couldn't
Griffin pretty
anymore.
hard.
Yeah.
I said, okay, I completely understand. I talked to Mike Foley, and I had hoped to see some of his vision for where he wanted the game to go, that we could help implement it. And Mike gave me nothing. He said, no thanks. And,
Understandable. On both of those cases, understandable. Yeah.
Yeah, it's his project, and he did not understand the success or the scale to which I was looking to put this out. It's not just like, hey, let's make some fantasy cards. No, I want to make a continuation of the game. And I don't think he saw either that we would go this far with it. The only thing he did was he pointed me to the right fonts and gave me some basic information about fonts, basically. He basically said, you go with these fonts, that's what I use. And that helped because I was coming from not a graphical familiarity at all. And it saved me a lot of time. Like, okay, well, let me look at this font. All right, there we go. And the rest came from just staring at raw deal cards and pulling out actual cards and looking at them and saying, okay, how do I make this that I'm trying to do look like that? But
we looked at a lot of steps in that process. I remember sitting down and being like, okay, does this look right? What looks off here? Compare these two, see which one looks better.
Have you done a lot of graphic work yourself at all, Nate?
No, not all that much. But I do have a keen eye, so when I'm looking at things, especially on a monitor, I can pick out, well, this looks right, this looks a little off. But as far as putting things together myself, I don't have a ton of experience.
he was actually helpful because I didn't realize at the time that I was using some old computer gear. I had an old CRT monitor. I didn't get a digital monitor until later. And so I wouldn't always see the things that he was seeing with a more sharpful eye. Then I finally got the monitor. Oh, now I can see where these look different.
Yeah.
But some of the subtleties just didn't come through working digitally. He was good with that as well as troubleshooting stuff and saying, hey, you realize if you do this with that, or sometimes, even though I'm very familiar with the rules, having worked with them for so long, some of the fine points, I would say, do this, and he'd go, well, actually, you're going to have to say this versus that. And some of the things we wanted to do, like sort of do an end run around RMS in some places. Good example being Vicky. We looked at these old SmackDown moves, and I thought, it's a shame. There's one or two good ones. There's face stretch, obviously. That's kind of cool. There's key lock. Obviously, Shane McMahon loves suicide lariat, and if you can get it, atomic knee drop is amazing. But what about all these other ones? What if we gave them a way to be useful? And that's where Vicky came out. Although Vicky was too good when she first came out, and some would say she's still a little too good. But the idea being, without Vicky, you're just throwing these random moves that aren't that good. It's a similar scenario to drawing a blank, where you're playing blank moves that you have nothing to fall back on without the drawing a blank card. So we had to make sure that's protected and stays in the ring once it gets there.
With Virtual 1 came a lot of new backstage cards. Why did you guys go that route? Because the backstage area gets a lot of heat for, well, I don't like the fact that now I have like almost a third deck I have to build now, which is a backstage deck,
A lot of it is situational. I thought ECW should really come into its own. So we got the House, the Hardcore build, especially coming off the One Night Stand pay-per-views. And even though I think at this point we were more into WWE, ECW territory, you'd say things like Umaga as the ECW champion, Matt Hardy. Yeah, I remember him from the old ECW days.
When he was about 14.
Yeah. So we wanted to make that a little more specific to that. And at the time, again, the crossover, we're looking at, well, let's make that so if you're bringing in Revolution Tommy Dreamer or Revolution Sandman, that you can get in on this ECW support, not just in the Revolution for Extremist, but in Classic play as well.
And there might be a question, why don't you just make it a pre-match then? And Creed touched on something a little earlier, is that we were trying to step back from pre-match corruption. And one of the ways that we can step back from pre-match corruption, pre-match bloat, is to put some of these things in the backstage area, so that way you don't have to worry about, oh, how do I fit this House at Hardcore built into my 12-card backlash or 10-card backlash deck at the time? Mm-hmm. And no, just put it backstage. You're fine.
Other concepts were like venues. I never liked the whole universally active concept.
It makes sense from a thematic standpoint, but mechanically it really feels shitty when you're a 2 superstar value and you're like, I'm never getting a fucking menu.
Yeah, and there were some that I didn't even think they should have bothered to print. They were just total filler cards. Like, when you have a lower superstar value, well, if I have a lower superstar value, then I'm not getting my freaking venue out. What are you talking about? And worse, the dirt worst to me was superstar specific venues. Like the Dudley Boys, they got Dudleyville, USA. Good luck on Spike Dudley. That's never going to hit the table because everybody's going to play a venue before me. So I said, what if we have a way that, okay, you can get a venue anyway, but it'll come at a cost. Well, how do we put that on yet another pre-match card? Or, I know, backstage card, and now we have Hometown Hero. You know, what about people who build around stipulations, but, you know, good luck because Vince, Managed by Vince exists. I think that's the one that has stipulations.
Yes.
And, you know, what about this?
Vince Giray.
Yeah, there's so many things that blank stipulation. Now, sure, kill Hell in a Cell. Kill it all day long. Sure, because that is definitely a strong card and deserves to have a counter mechanism. But what about, you know, simple ones like Chicago Street Fight? What about wacky stipulations like touch corner turnbuckles or whatever that is?
Buried alive match.
Yeah, buried alive match. What's the point of building around this if somebody can just go, no? Especially on a card that's so popular, it's not like they're packing an obscure card that happens to stop stipulations. And, man, bad luck, you happen to run it. No, we're talking about Managed by Vince that people are fighting over to get on the board.
Or Vince Giray that people are packing just to kill multis.
Right, exactly. So, okay, well, then pulled some strings to get my match. And put Punjabi prison match on there as a great little rib. But
yeah.
We wanted to enhance the gameplay and let players say, I want to build around this, and say, yes, you can build around this, and here's how you're going to make that happen. But to make it fair, we usually try to include a trade-off of some sort. I think Hometown Hero is a -2 hand size.
Yes.
And Pulled Some Strings has something else, you can't play this or that. So we say, okay, if you want to commit to this strategy, that's great, but that's going to reduce you over here as a trade-off for this. Now, yes, there's a lot of backstage cards, and over time, as we've tried to refine the game rather than banning cards, and we even tried that. We even tried the NXT format and said, okay, instead of having a bunch of shenanigan cards in this format, we'll ban this, we'll errata this, and we'll even give you a card that tells you what's going on. So you don't have to go reference the website. Just put this right in front of you. And then if you need to know what's different about this card, then you can look at the website.
And the crowd went mild.
Everybody said, great, see you later, bye, and went back to playing what they were playing before. So
well, he tried.
Yeah. So when people say, well, why didn't you try this? We did. And
yeah, I don't think a lot of people, and it never picked up any steam at all. I think a lot of guys who are getting, because we're seeing a lot of, lately in the last several months, especially when the pandemic hit, a lot of new players are coming into playing now. So I'm noticing a lot of new names on the boards. There's even a couple of old school guys who haven't played since maybe Fully Loaded probably or something like that.
Sure.
You know, that are coming in and playing it and discovering virtual now. So I don't think a lot of people are aware of that format. I don't know if it ever would take off anyways, but I thought it was a nice idea. It gave people what they were bitching about and complaining about, and yet they didn't take it. And people who were bitching about it did nothing with it.
Yep.
So
that happens more often than not.
You'll also see a lot where people will say, what about this obscure guy? You should make him. And there's a lot of +1 mentality. Yeah. And there's been times when we've made them and nobody plays them.
Like Norman Smiley?
Norman might actually see some play, but
that
in
hurts
some
my
cases,
heart, though, because I love Norman Smiley.
Yeah.
I love putting that
If half the people out there who talk about, like, oh, I love him, were a fan of his back in the day, he'd still be relevant today.
I was a fan of his back in the day.
But you're the minority.
We're a smaller percentage than we'd like to admit, unfortunately.
Oh, yeah, no, by far.
So when you guys are developing V1 that's like that, what would you say was the most difficult superstar to build, to create?
The Jericho remake springs to mind.
Because you guys made a lot of new stars, though. I mean, not only did you already we had everybody had a support card. We had a lot of new superstars to play too.
Yep.
Which was amazing. I mean,
the Rock remake was easy. Just give him movie cards.
Yeah.
Big movie star now.
Sure.
That was an easy one for me. It was somebody should have a thing with movie cards, and Dwayne Johnson is making all these movies. Done.
No brainer.
Done. Easy. especially when I went to make his support cards, it's like he was in this movie, he was in this movie, this. Okay, well, there's his support cards done.
There it is. Well, who
But
was the
yeah,
most
I think
difficult?
the Jericho remake was the one that was hardest to kind of lock down because we were going in a weirder direction with, all right, there's this I have a major announcement card that exists, but it's never really made a splash because it's kind of like Back to Basics, but not, because you don't actually search for the things during the pre-match phase. You just, it gives you a pseudo search ability. Can we do something with that? And the Jericho remake was there to be like, yeah, we can try it. And I remember when we made that, there was some blowback that, oh, you made that for Jericho? And it's like, okay, come on. One, how many variations of a discard ability can we give to Chris fucking Jericho before you people are happy?
Yeah.
And two, it's Chris fucking Jericho. He's a major announcement.
Yeah.
Yeah, he would disappear for a while and come back with a big to do, or he would do a
Yep.
big thing. He was always very dramatic. So it just, if you're going to make somebody around that card title, that seemed like a good choice. Chris Jericho, to his credit, even to this day, is just a walking card title machine. You know, we reached a point where we're like, no, we have enough Jericho remakes. We've got, you know, we did a pre-make, as I using to call it,
Yes.
with
Lionheart.
Lionheart. Thank you. I like it was the wrong title in my head thing. We've done Sexy Beast, we've done Lionheart, and then when we went back through and made the legend versions of everybody, we made the Second Coming, because he had just done another big comeback.
Yep.
And even when we're going, okay, we have enough Jericho, then you start coming out with the list. You just made the list, and he's got his scarf. And I'm like, I could make a new card set just out of whatever year that was, 2014, 2015.
Somewhere around there.
That era of Chris Jericho. And now he's in AEW, and he's making all these other new, a bit of the bubbly and Le Champion.
Right now, he's a
Demo
demigod.
God.
Yeah.
God.
This guy just spews out card titles, and then you look at somebody that you want to make, somebody who fills a specific role. I'm thinking of like Michael Tarver or Ezekiel Jackson, where we made them just because they were part of the group, and we had everybody else, and it felt weird to not make them. But then we're struggling to find things to make cards about. I can't tell you the number of Michael Tarver promos I watched just to try to get anything. Anything, please give me something I can build around.
And if anybody's ever seen Michael Tarver or heard Michael Tarver give a promo, respect to Creed for actually sitting through that shit.
Picture like
He was just hurting the crowd's feelings at that point.
Picture the most basic promo you could think of, and you spend the whole time waiting for like a punchline or a catchphrase, and it never comes.
Never. So, kind of like right now. So
Exactly. Congratulations, you've just been Tarvered.
So the Jericho remake was, you say, the most difficult? What about Owen Hart? Was he not difficult, or?
No, Owen came together really fast.
Really? Okay.
Because Owen Hart has that ability where your stuff is chained. That is a very simple ability to understand. It's a very simple ability to implement. It's also very potent.
Because it went through many revisions, if I not recall correctly.
It went through tuning to make sure that it, one, worked as intended, and two, didn't do crazy things.
With doing all these crazy things like that, and if you're the rules guy,
yep,
with all these new cards, I mean, you have to go through every single card and figure out how it interacts with the timing mechanism. Blah, blah, blah. I mean, that's got to be labor intensive right there.
Yes, it absolutely was.
And this is where his insights were so golden, because I really say I couldn't have done this without Nate, because there was a lot of back end stuff he was doing besides all of the front end stuff, where he would look at a card and say, well, technically it's going to work this way, or, you know, this is actually going to do this, or this is going to do this other thing.
Right. How do we make Owen Hart work with Bash without it just being, no, he crashes on startup because his entire deck is illegal?
Yeah. Was there key cards that gave you a run for your money in a rules sense, or is it?
Nothing is immediately springing to mind, because I wasn't really sitting down with one card at a time and just having kittens about it. It was just here's what it is. Okay, I can understand how this card works. Let's change this line, tweak this. Okay, now it actually functions on next. I was spending so little time on an individual card because the set's 430 cards. I don't have time. If I spent an hour on one card, then I'd still be working on Virtual 1.
This is true. Very true. Is there, then speaking of then, is there a key, non-superstar specific card? Is there a key card that you find is the key card for that set? Or key set of cards?
Actually, yes. Ref Takes Bump. Ref Takes Bump always sticks out in my mind as the iconic Virtual 1 card. Because I think that was one of the first cards that got written. And it was something that just spawned from, hey, ref bumps happen all the goddamn time, and they never show up in Raw Deal. We should have the ref take a bump sometimes. And I think Ref Takes a Bump is very emblematic of the mentality of Virtual 1 because I can't imagine the Ref Takes a Bump has fallen out of play, but maybe some people aren't familiar with Virtual 1 or Virtual in general. But Ref Takes a Bump says that if your opponent reverses your maneuver with a non-unique printed D0 reversal, you can drop Ref Takes a Bump from your hand into the ring and then stick the maneuver anyway. It doesn't do any damage or do any effects, but you still get the fortitude. So you stepped aside and then I clocked the ref.
Nice.
So that gave a lot of people a way to start getting on the board, even if their stuff got stuffed.
Interesting. That's nice. I remember that. Vaguely remember that cards like that. I remember getting hit by it a couple times at an ACMT event.
Mm-hmm.
But
it pairs well for guys who have like, if you do X or have X, then your maneuver can only be reversed by D0 cards. Okay, so you lock that in. There's your D0 card. Thank you. You hit the ref. I'm getting it anyway.
Yep.
It's a nice action card. I can't, because Virtual 1's so far from me way back when. I was still playing and building decks at the time too. So, I mean, but it's been so long. What were the key? I don't have a website to reference anymore. So
the Virtual 1 set list is on TCO.
Yeah. Any key reversals from that release?
I think there's two cards that come to mind. There's a couple of cards with red on them, but the two that come to mind are Carlito Says, because he wanted to give a non-fan favorite way to reference or to deal with some of those hard to reverse that can only be reversed and such. And it went through a few iterations to get it right. But
and then when we introduced the concept of reversal restrictions as kind of a keyword, we went back and just completely redid the text to make it a lot cleaner.
Had to overhaul it to get it to do what we wanted, but it got the job done. Mm-hmm. And the other one was something that was just inspired by a moment. I was playing a combo back to basics 2-man power trip deck, which was weird, but it worked at the time. Against Jason Griffey at one of the conventions. And so I'm doing my actions where like do this to recover and then do this, and then it leads to a plunge and then you hit a move. Something about face and teaser mode, I think.
Yeah.
But so I'm doing my little combos to set it up, recovering cards. And something I heard him say a couple times that weekend was, "Stop trying to hit me and hit me." And I looked up and just kind of blanked at it. And I went, "I'm not trying to hit you yet." He goes, "Oh, okay." I guess it was just something for him to say when he was bored and watching people play solitaire, sort of. So I thought, well, if we want to have a more maneuver-driven game, why not add an action reversal and use that? So that's where that came from. And for a while,
that was a nice little shout out to Griffey because he said that a lot.
And that was a staple in some of my decks for a long time. And occasionally it pops in, especially in heal decks where you don't have sloppy, but you want another action reversal. I think it may have faded out of the meta with especially the running heal cheater, with the action reversals that came in Saturday night's main event, Shocking and your Jive Soul Bro.
Yeah.
I want to go back to your question though.
Before you do that, I want to throw in one more reversal, but I'm going to cheat because this card actually has no red on it. It's Stop Sign. I just love the concept of you're going to high risk me. Stop!
Yeah. There were so many times that it was it was just one of those fun concepts that I thought, man, I wish you could just whack a guy that jumped out of the air.
Yeah. And every time I play or do anything with that card, I can hear Jerry Lawler screaming, "Stop!" All right, please continue. You were about to go back to a previous question.
Your previous question was, what were some of the harder superstars to make? And I really had to think about that. Kind of moved on. But I think probably the harder ones were superstars that we wanted to give more cards to because they had a very limited set. So instead of just getting them a card, we gave them a remake. This would be Ken Kennedy was one. They said, okay, we're going to make 5 more cards for Kennedy. We can do that. But what does his other superstar do?
Yeah, that was tough.
He plays all this pre-match because when he walks to the ring, he talks a lot. And we really had to struggle to find something to make him do that was separate from Kennedy. Especially because I had the very stupid idea that, look, this backstage, if you blank here, it doesn't matter which version you play. Then why do I need a second version? Oh, I didn't think about that. So it's later we revised that and said, okay, here's a new direction for future of sports entertainment that'll be different from playing Ken Kennedy. And here's what each brings to the table. And we didn't always get that right in the first set, but I think we were able to work it in later on. The other one that comes to mind is China Doll.
Yeah.
Oh, I forgot about that one.
That was, I don't know. I wish we could have done a remake without doing a remake. You know, just here's 5 cards.
Yeah.
Because China Doll was one of those, we just tried to shoehorn some ideas in. Like, you know what? Nobody's really a dynamic superstar. Well, let's make her a dynamic superstar because she had dynamic energy in the ring or something. I don't know. Sure. And then let's make it more interesting because she was always around the other DX guys and they were usually there to chip in. So you can pack some DX cards. And then everything we've done to try to build on that, to try to make her a little more playable, just we've kind of piled on a bit rather than getting it right the first time.
Well, not every one of them going to be a home run, you know?
Yeah. And
nobody bets 1,000.
Yeah.
Right. And RKO was another one where we had an idea and it was like, the idea was, what if you could do like a 2-man power trip for Revolution? But hey, they can be a classic or a Revolution superstar. You can just play whatever you want with them.
I built that deck
We
before.
even made the 2 different superstar cards where one was the classic portrait landscape or portrait format and one was the Revolution landscape.
Which makes them a great all-access superstar. And I think they're pretty good in Revolution too.
They're very good in Revolution when you can pack both their storylines. And it was, I built that deck. It was pretty, I think it was pretty strong. I love Revolution, so that's just me.
It wasn't until recently that somebody said, you know, these guys kind of suck in Classic, right? Oh.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, good point. Okay, so we added more Classic only support and then as we're moving into a more, can't think of the adjective I'm looking for, but it's moving to a more specifically Classic design in virtual that we're more easily focused on that. And we've basically, at this point, just said, we're not going to worry about Revolution. We're not going to worry about, what if this guy gets corners? Don't worry about it. Just focus on Classic. Because that seems to be what everybody's playing. And then we say, okay, if you want to play all access, feel free. But, you know, that's the Wild West out there. Good luck.
I swear there's no love for Revolution. I swear to God.
That's a topic for another day.
The Rodney Dangerfield of the Raw Deal.
That's right. Getting no respect. I mean, it's a huge set. Did you intend to make it that big of a release? I mean,
well, remember, virtual Revolution 4, the original Revolution 4, not the one that you had anything to do with, was a one and done. So we were just putting things in, and we were anticipating that we were just going to do this, and it was going to be over, and everybody would have fun.
From start to finish, what was the design? When did it ever actually officially get released?
I think the official release, we had it out there for people to download and play around with, but when we officially said, okay, this is it, the set's released, was end of 2008. I think for the end of the year is when I said, okay, here it is. Welcome to 2009. Here's the final set of Raw Deal. Good luck, have fun.
Yes.
And that's why we tried to squeeze in so many superstars because, Mr. Perfect, sure, let's get him in there.
I mean,
The
it's
Four
just like
Horsemen.
you just
Why
kept on,
not?
you kept on packing on more and more and more. Like, I mean, you just kept on packing more. I guess with the mentality of like, this is it, we're done.
Yeah.
Let's just throw them all in now, and then we just wipe our hands.
Yeah,
and
we
go
weren't
away.
pacing ourselves. We were just like, hey, we have this stuff. Let's get it done, get it in, so that way we can get it to the people.
That same mentality, this is it, that's done, let's put it all in, also cropped up in Virtual 5, which is why that set is
It's
500
huge.
freaking cards and
Yeah.
40 superstars. And because that was like, you know what, I need to be done with this. We'll just make everybody and call it good. Thank you, good night.
And every time we say we need to be done with this, let's just pack it in. Thank you, good night. It never fucking works out.
You guys are still slightly still involved. So I mean,
well, not many people know this, but Eric, who is now I mean, we don't really think too much in terms of titles or roles or whatever, but he's basically the
lead
director
designer
of Raw Deal. He's been unfortunately sidelined with a number of things that have happened. He was in a very bad car accident recently. And he's okay generally. I mean, he's not like in a life-threatening situation, but he's definitely banged up pretty bad.
Yeah.
And was already in the midst of trying to sell his home and move into a new one. So he's got this, plus the pandemic scenarios, trying to work, issues with his wife's health, I think. He's got a lot going on. So he's had to kind of step back, and that's part of why we've seen delays in Virtual 11. And because I've taken a year off and just essentially walked away from the game, I feel a lot more recharged, and I don't feel that burnout that I was at a year or two ago. So I've been able to step up and say, okay, guys, let me come in, help you out. Let's get these new superstars going. Let's see what we want to do in this regard. Let me throw some graphics together for you guys. And I'll give you a little sneak preview here, is that with Virtual 11, when it drops, I believe the plan is next month, we're going to have a few other pleasant surprises for some of the people who've waited so long to try to make the release, worth the extended wait. So we'll see how that goes down when it all comes out. But we're not talking about Virtual 11. We're talking about Virtual 1.
Yeah.
So
I mean, at what point did you guys decide to change the name from Rev 4 to Break the Walls Down?
That didn't come until later.
Yeah, I think. What was
that? Break the Walls Down.
Virtual 4? Yeah. Or no, Break the Walls Down was always in, but it was Revolution 4, Break the Walls Down.
Gotcha.
We changed the nomenclature from Revolution to Virtual. That was when VR4 came out, right?
No, it was Virtual 3.
Right. But that was around the same time frame because we were doing Virtual 3 and VR4
Well, together. I think you might be right there, because when we started saying, well, we're going to make a Revolution set, then why are we calling this Revolution 4 and Revolution 5?
Yeah.
You know what? This is this idea also came from the Buffy Buffy guys, but they were talking about their virtual Buffy cards, and I was like, you know what? That sounds good. Why don't we run with virtual? That's what we'll call it. Mm-hmm. So that really kicked off, and that didn't come until after this set was released for a year or two, that we said, okay, let's call this the virtual sets. We'll have Virtual 1. We'll rename it from Rev 4 to Virtual 1. WCW is now Virtual 2. What else going to be Rev 5 is now Virtual 3. And then that way the Revolution name was reserved strictly for purely Revolution sets.
Yep. Thank God. Well, there was no plans of doing a Revolution 4 and stuff like that. I know that I approached you about, hey, if we knocked out some ideas, would you be okay? And you're like, have at it, go do whatever. Go ahead, have at it.
Yeah, Classic had seen such a resurgence after being kind of kept in the dark for a year, that there was so much more focus there, that if somebody else wanted to do Revolution and kind of outsource that, I'm like, hey, I'm all for it, man.
Yeah,
that way we get both sides of the fence get fed. And you guys came up with some great ideas, and we threw in some that, well, there's got to be a Revolution Rock, because he was going to be in Revolution 4. So, let me throw some ideas in for what he could do. And we worked out that very well, I think. Didn't get it all right the first time, but when do we ever?
No, I like Rev 4. It was a lot of fun. I like playing Carlito. That was the first. That was my first superstar I ever designed. Revolution Carlito. It's kind of fun. So you guys release it. You kind of are like, whew, I'm done. All right, that was a lot of work. Fuck this. I'm done. I'm out. I'm tapping out. At what point then did you guys go, maybe we'll do another one?
few months later, a gentleman named Chris Templeton, who had he was a very eager player from the Dallas area, and he had some ideas, and some of them were a little bit much, but he had some ideas for, hey, what if we did a WCW set? You know, WCW didn't see too much. What if we actually did that? I got some ideas if you want them. So, you know, I was kind of enjoying, after all the work we put into Rev 4 Virtual 1, I was kind of enjoying being done with it, sort of having some free time in my life.
Were you kind of hitting the beach, enjoying the sun?
More like ducking tornadoes.
Yeah, tornadoes. At the time, still tornadoes, yeah. We hadn't traded you yet for Alan.
Exactly. So Chris says, well, what about these ideas? Especially when one of them was Diamond Dallas Page, who has always been a favorite of mine. I like the guy personally, having got to meet him once in the 90s. Okay, so I messaged a few of the guys, or I posted, I said, you guys be interested in doing like a little, small set, almost like a Ruthless Aggression kind of thing, where we just have, a set of superstars? Is that something you guys want to do? And I was like, yeah, I guess so. Sure. Okay. And I knew people would be interested in more superstars? Oh, sure. Okay.
Yeah.
And a lot of those names were very popular, like Sting, maybe not so much like Sting, but, the idea of the Wolf Pack, where we can also get in some support from the other guys. We had done, and that was something I liked doing, by the way, was being able to get in more support, which is kind of why, like Melina, I like the idea of making her, because she was an interesting character, but also would be able to get in some M&M support. Johnny Nitro, same thing, but we'll just remake that so you have another way to play if you wanted to use the M&M cards, but you don't necessarily want to play without your bin patch cards. Well, what if we give you a Johnny Nitro jumps around the ring kind of superstar? All right. So we get into the Dean Malenko and the Radicals, and how that set enabled Dean to be built even just as a promo superstar, because there weren't that many pictures of him, so it wasn't in the WWE for that long. So what about making Saturn? You know what? He's the only Radical we don't have. That sounds good too. And there we get into that inclusion mentality. Thankfully, Saturn had such a strong ability that we actually had to tone him down a bit, where the whole grapples and foreign objects are chained. And there was a lot of inspiration there. And I said, okay, you know what? Let's do one more thing. And then there was enough ideas on the table, and they were starting to bring in some new talent, finally, where we saw Cody Rhodes and Ted DiBiase Jr. Come in, and there was Priceless and Legacy. Then some other ideas came in, like, well, we have Revolution in manga. What if we had like Classic in manga? What if Classic Great Khali? And some ideas that spawned from there that made us say, you know what, let's do one more set. Let's see how that works out. And then it became, it was actually kind of fun. And even though all the work that was involved, we were able to overhaul all of those cards. And the great Virtual One remastering happened, which that took months. But when it was all done, it was so nice to be able to say, oh, yes, this is what real raw deal cards look like, not those little skimpy things I was working with originally.
Well, by that time, too, you guys cleaned up some things, not only as far as graphically, you guys also went back and found some things that weren't working as originally planned, and those got kind of reworded or, redone. It's a beautiful thing about virtuals, that you can make changes on the fly when you need to. So I know people are like, oh, you got to print another card out now. But
as opposed to remembering an errata on a card that you can never get fixed.
Correct. You can never please everybody.
Smash. You know what
I'm talking about. One card of the world elbow.
Yeah. But now you're doing a second release. Did you, at this point, start thinking, we might be doing this thing annually now?
It wasn't until Virtual 3 that I really got, what if this is a regular thing? What if we're actually continuing the game rather than just, well, we'll put out a set and we'll put out a little more. And, I guess if you guys want, we have a few names and we can find the pictures. Maybe we'll put out a couple more. It was like, what if we actually keep the game going? I think a big impetus in that was watching the tournament scene end at the end of the printed game. It didn't really feel like Raw Deal was going to continue, but hearing in different places, no, people are still getting together and play. then it became, well, what can we offer people? So we came up with the prize cards, the title belts, and the 10th anniversary. Okay, well, maybe we can come up with some more prize. Oh, all right. Well, people want that. And unfortunately, now it's reached a point where prize kits aren't really a thing. We're not saying people get together or they're coming up with their own support.
Mm-hmm.
So one thing I will hint at, 2 years ago, I believe it was, we released a set of alternate prize card images. So we had the Raw title, the Raw tag team title throwbacks, or the undisputed throwback, and those were just prize cards. And then we released 8 of those cards and said, here you go, now you can play with them, but the people who won the prizes will still have their original images. We're actually going to be finishing that project with the release of Virtual 11. I have finished up some images and got a few other things to put out as well.
Yeah, you shared some of those images with me. They look amazing.
Thank you.
I think they look really amazing.
Feels good to actually go in and make pretty cards again.
Yeah, well, you also have there's no, time frame for you and stuff like that. It's just kind of like, free, you're not really, and it's just, I'm just doing some graphic work, some cool graphic work. I'm not having to design anything and play test it and this, that, and the other. It's just, just making cool looking shit.
Yeah, that's fun.
Yeah, I
and
get
Keith
that.
is actually doing a good job. I'm going to be working with him to try to go next level on a few things, but he's already put out some great stuff. Virtual 11 got some good picture ideas. There's one that every time I see it, it makes me chuckle. I don't know where he found it, but man, that picture is just so dead on. But I think we'll be in good hands, even if I'm not the one who's necessarily putting it all together.
Not to get completely off the topic of virtual ones like that, but since we're bringing up what's coming up, is Virtual 11 it, or is there still more ideas down the road? I talked to Eric. I had Eric on one time, and he makes it sound like we're going to have more in the future. But I don't know. Is that something that you think?
There's already some concepts that have been mentioned in terms of wanting to lock down what they have now. But what about this idea? What about that idea? And the general mentality is, we'll save that for Virtual 12.
Okay.
And they're already lining up a Then Now Forever 2. And Eric may yell at me for spoiling this a little early, but there is plans for another small holiday set again, and some names that are kicked around for that. And I think people will be pleasant.
I think people have come to expect that a holiday set's kind of something they enjoy. It's small. It's a little shot in there for the holiday. It's kind of nice,
Yeah.
but
as long as there's still interest in people wanting to play the game, I think there'll still be virtual sets coming.
Well, that's one of the questions I got asked on the Instagram page too, was like, do you find that since Virtual 1 has, there's some detractors that don't like virtual at all. And that's fine. And you can't please everybody.
I've spoken to people that I know personally that are like, I'm not interested in this.
Yeah.
And one of the things that they always tell me is that the pre-match phase takes too long. And yeah, I understand that. If I could go back and do it again, I would find a way to do what we wanted to do and open up the pre-match phase without making it take so long. But that's a goal that I could chase for years and never get it quite right. At some point, you have to ship the fucking thing.
Yeah, and you're never, and even if you did feel like in your mind you got it right, there's going to be people out there going like, well, I don't like the way you did it. So it doesn't matter.
Of course.
It doesn't matter.
Everybody's a fucking armchair designer.
Of course. They're all Monday morning quarterbacks.
Yep.
So do you feel...
also the preconceived notions, like people have an idea. Like we talked about Norman Smiley.
Sure.
People might think, well, Norman Smiley, he'll be something like this. And then we put out, well, here's what Norman does, because that's how we perceive Norman to interact. And most times, not all the time, sometimes we're trying to shoehorn something in, like the China doll thing.
Sure.
Or maybe the sexy beast didn't quite land where we wanted it, but it was a good idea. But sometimes, most of the time, we're saying, what does Norman Smiley look like in game terms? And we end up with a small-handed guy struggling. He can only do a little bit. He's getting hit, but he's a scrapper. He's staying in there with his little limited abilities.
And screaming every chance he gets.
Yes, exactly. So some people get a deck like that, and they're like, well, that's not what I had in mind. This sucks. Why didn't you make Norman Smiley? We did.
Why didn't you read my mind?
Good?
Yeah, why didn't you read my mind?
And their perception of how it should be doesn't execute with what comes out. This also ties into what you're saying about pre-match, because for people who played the game back in the day, when pre-match was 3 cards, it was, okay, I've underrated. I draw 3 cards, I'm done.
Yep.
Now you're looking at something like a no-show. Well, now, hold on, I got to search my deck for 2 cards. Okay, I'm going to put them in. And now no-show has a special timing, so I have to remember to execute that. And now I have to go get my other pre-card that's going to come in place of that. So there was already an escalation in what pre-match meant, as opposed to a quick stop on the way to the match to being almost its own phase. And while backstage hadn't really evolved to that level, there was a little bit of, okay, I'm revealing these 2 cards, or I'm revealing these enforcers. Here's who I'm picking. So again, it was a brief stop on the way. And now people who have to engage that as a phase are a little put off by the change, because some people just don't handle the change well. I know a certain WWE superstar who didn't like backlash cards and liked the game when it was just a deck and just a hand. And that's fine. Some people
can't see the woods for the trees.
Well, that's the
well played.
reason why we have it's the evolution of things, man.
Sure. Which does make me laugh when people say, well, you changed everything. Like, did you play the game when it was in print?
Yeah.
Because I did. And I remember when my action-heavy deck died a flaming death when Vengeance came out, and suddenly you had to worry about Highlight of the Night shutting you to 1 action, or Leader of the Edge Army going, oh yeah, sure, keep playing your actions. I'll keep drawing. Go for it. Your discard deck isn't going to work the way you think. When you had, okay, I have an action-heavy deck, and here comes volley this. Or you have, this old strategy. So many times you play a deck from the old set, you look at the new set and go, yeah, that's not going to fly. That's not going to work. And
the game's got to change. I mean, otherwise it's stagnant, and it's always going to be boring. And that's kind of why I think Revolution was fun, but why V1 came out to kind of, it really even the playing field, though. It really took a lot of guys who did need help, like the X-Pacs and stuff like that, he became a very good deck after you guys gave him in V1.
Yeah, I remember a ton of the feedback that we got when Virtual 1 came out was, holy shit, I can play all these people that I really liked and just fell behind.
Yeah, it was fun to those first few tournaments we would hold, in SoCal, where everybody would come to my house and seeing what they were building, as I gave them prize support, or like everybody who came to play, like I remember spending all that time going, well, shit, I got a glue stick, 14 Bret Hart decks together now, so I can give them away for everybody to come and and play, and then start seeing over the months, watching people like start playing these new superstars, these new cards in the decks. It was interesting to see. Did you guys get a feel that, hey, there's a lot of guys coming back to play now because it's fun? We have a virtual thing now.
There was some trickle in where people would wander in or get word of mouth. Wait, what's this? And there was some spoiler shot. I remember getting a massive negative feedback post from Pete. I don't remember his last name, but he was the UK commissioner for a while.
Yes.
Towards the end of the game, and he kind of broke down a lot of things and was not necessarily having a positive outlook on it. Like, he looked at the China maneuvers and said, "What do you mean when you're a female superstar? Who else would you be?" And in one word, Eugene.
Yep.
Because we were well aware that Eugene was already good with all of the boost we talked about him getting in Great American Bash, especially. And now, if you're playing all access, one superstar like Triple H might get as many as 5, 6 trademarks. Mm-hmm. Eugene got them all, save a couple of in-match. But, sure. He got like freaking, 80, 100 new maneuvers to choose from in all access? No, he does not need help. And if we want to make a good card, a good maneuver for this person, we need to make sure it's not going to affect Eugene. So there's a lot of, can it be packed by Eugene? Can it be when you're a female superstar? And these little...
When you're a tag team.
Yeah. So we finally had to say, you know what, forget it. No. Eugene can pack classic maneuvers. Or Eugene can pack, printed
non-virtual.
Maneuvers. Yeah, non-virtual maneuvers. No, we're going to keep, much like we're dividing Revolution All Access, Revolution Classic, we're also dividing what Eugene can pack, old stuff only, and he has plenty to choose from.
When maybe it's not V1, but when did the cannot respond text coming into play?
There's some unrespondable stuff in V1.
Okay.
We worded it slightly differently as can't play reversals too, but that still lets you use aces and stuff like that. So later on, we just filtered it down to no, you can't respond to this. And I've seen some blowback on can't respond because it does dial back some of the interactivity in the game because I just do this thing and you can't do anything about it. But throughout Rodale, there have been things that you just can't do anything about. Cannot Be Reversed was effectively unrespondable for years and years and years before finally there was a reversal card that came out to it. And we're just like, hey, sometimes these things just need to hit. It's a way to give a superstar a benchmark or a milestone that they can get to and be like, okay, I accomplished this thing. I get this benefit for it. Or I get this free shot.
Yeah. And things that would definitely limit the superstar if they had to waste a lot of time trying to push it through.
Yep.
You know, we could, you take a mid-match action. We want it to hit the table because it's going to give you these additional perks in this one situation, usually when you're losing. Yes. Or when you have lower fortitude, more specific, but not necessarily. Anyway.
Nice version of saying you're losing.
Yeah, you're getting your ass handed to you. Okay?
That's right. Oh,
yep.
Take it a step
so,
further, Creed.
We can either say, push this card through, it gets reversed, put it back in your backlash, try again next turn. And maybe 4 turns later, that finally goes through. But how many turns is your opponent getting to keep punching you when you're at a lower fortitude, so you don't have access to your second tier reversals like manager, sloppy, unscrupulous, outside, all that stuff. So you're stuck at the low end of things, and we want this to just happen so you can engage an advanced skill set. Well, rather than screw around with, let's see how long it takes for this to hit the table, we just say, you know what, can't be responded to, go. And this gives you that second gear that a lot of decks need to be able to shift and move forward in a way when they can't necessarily do that from 0 or from 2 fortitude off an elbow or something, nonsense like that. It goes back to the whole concept, whole overarching design of wanting to make the game more interactive.
And wanting you to be able to play cards.
Yeah, and some people in that instance will say, well, it's not very interactive, I can't respond to it. No, your interaction comes after that hits the table. Besides, if that has hit the table,
you've been pretty interactive. You've been pretty interactive before.
Yes, exactly. You already had your interaction. It's their turn. Stop being selfish.
Yeah, this is not solitaire.
Yes.
What's been the most fun out of Virtual One for you guys? What was the most fun thing for you guys to do?
I really liked slipping in a lot of the little things, the little Easter eggs, the references to other things, like The Godfather. The Godfather has a line in his ability that says, when one of your card effects or one of your opponent's reversals would cause you to overturn enough cards to make you lose the game or cause you to lose the game directly, just ignore it. That seems really random and weird, and why does he have that? I'm going to tell you why he has that, and it involves a little movie called Southland, what was it, Southland Tales?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So there's a throwaway line in that movie, and I believe that The Rock says it, that I'm a pimp and pimps don't commit suicide. Well, The Godfather's the biggest pimp I know, so that line is in there because pimps don't commit suicide, so The Godfather can't commit suicide.
Nice
it
little
was
fun
cute.
fact.
It gave him a little extra push, and it's one of those things that comes up once in a blue moon, but when it does come up, it's really splashy and effective and noticeable, and it lets you play a little looser. Lets you actually attempt cards without worrying about getting reversal for 30 to death. So I thought it was fun.
Those were some of the subtle changes we tried to do also. That we talked before in No Way Out, how they had Denyo try to reduce hybrid reversals. And like there was a card, I don't think it ever saw play, but Unstoppable Force.
Yes.
Scroll back up to it. And it's an action that basically says, for the next 2 turns, your opponent's reversals don't deal damage, and they're essentially blank.
Yes.
The concept being, no, you're not going to draw a bunch of cards if you play this. No, you're not going to hit me for 15 damage on a reversal. Again, forcing that mentality of let's try to let people throw moves and not have to worry as much about losing the game for trying to do what you're supposed to do, which is, play maneuvers in a wrestling game.
And I remember that card had some
What?
friction because there was a misunderstanding that the reversals are blank means that they can't reverse anything. And we were like, no, look at Virtual 1. There's that anti-reversal. Why don't you kiss my ass? That has literally no text, and it still functions just fine. It'll work. Just
Yep.
believe that we know what we're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think the rules work this way. As The Rock would say, it doesn't matter what you think.
Correct.
So what is there any hidden, like little hidden things, any hidden jewels about Virtual 1?
Lots. Are you talking hidden things like text or hidden things like pictures?
Whatever you like.
Okay. Well, which one was it? Create enough shenanigans that I'm in the picture of?
Yes, you are most
Yes.
definitely a hidden thing in virtual.
So the picture on Enough Shenanigans is a shot from SmackDown, and Michael Cole and Mick Foley are at the announce table calling the match, except they're not. It's Michael Cole and me. Christopher photoshopped my face over Mick Foley.
Nice.
Or GIMP, as the case may be. But
Yeah.
yes,
What else?
there's other little cards that kind of snuck in that we tried to enable certain strategies. Some of them were obvious, like how we tried to build up Bash. Like Bash. Okay, well, if you're going to play 3 pre-match to get your fortitude, how about getting a little help with your pre-match space? So we had Bash Feud, which also meant you didn't have to rely on, according to Linda, let's show everybody your entire deck just so you get a couple extra slots.
Yeah.
And then the taunt cards we talked about. There's a few that sneak in that don't really see play that could, like getting some old school payback. If you're running a back to basics deck and you're worried about cycling your hand, you can throw that out as an old school card. And whenever you play a maneuver, you get to draw one, discard one.
Yes.
Yeah,
And
so
then
go
if you
through
don't
your
have
deck.
basics in your ring, you end your turn.
Right. So you could use it with another card like That's Value, or a pre-match card that you have, a superstar specific pre-match card, sorry, that's going to do the same thing. We also tried to put some other options for Jimmy, not just so that the other, like if we're both playing Legends, you're going to drop Jimmy first if you're a higher superstar value, unless there's other rivals. What if I just had another manager that Legends could play?
Yep.
That was tricky because we didn't want to make something that was necessarily as powerful as Jimmy, but gave different ideas so that Legends could still have a benefit, even if Jimmy wasn't viable. Maybe you were playing against an opponent. Maybe playing against Rhino. What good is Jimmy going to do in a match against Rhino? You can't reverse from your ring anyway against Warfare. So, okay, well, I'll run Classy Freddy Blast. I'll run Bobby the Brain Heenan as my manager. One of those other throwback style managers that can definitely help you out. And then I just absolutely wanted to make a pre-match, mid-match maneuver hybrid. So we ended up with a quick bashing, which originally was a little too good because it actually gave you 2 fortitude, assuming it went through, which most people would not be able to reverse a strike in pre-match. And 5 fortitude was a little too much, so we had to tone that down to where it just gave a discount to maneuvers. And whether that card needed to be made is another subject, but it was sure fun to make.
Well, I'll tell you, right, Virtual 1 was a surprise, I think, even to some people. Well, obviously it was a SoCal because guys weren't paying attention to TCO. I don't even remember, honestly, how I came across it, but when I started seeing stuff like that, my first thought was like, prize support for my local area. Awesome. And once people started figuring it out, Drew and all those guys, Albert, they all figured it out. It's like that was coming from TCO, like, yeah, we know, but you're doing all the work on glue sticking everything, so we'll just let you keep doing it. They're no dummies. So yeah, I loved it. I thought it was kind of cool. I was just kind of really in a few years of just like selling the product itself from Comic Images. I'm like, oh great, I just got into this. Now I got to get out of it, kind of thing. But it kept the game going, and it's still going to this day, which is awesome.
Mm-hmm.
It's a wonderful thing. I love it.
One other hidden jewel that I think we've talked about in other ones, that the late and beloved Adam Kreitz.
Yes.
I actually talked to him in the development of Raw Deal when I got wind of some of those promo superstar prize cards he was handing out, where he would put together his own versions of a few legendary guys that weren't in the game. So he had done, I don't remember if he did Mr. Perfect, but
he did LOD.
LOD,
He did
Road Warriors.
He did Bruno Sammartino.
He did a Bruno, yes.
Yes.
I just discovered that recently when I was looking through them. There's at least one. Brainbusters.
Yes.
And Macho Man Randy Savage.
Yes. Thank you.
Yes.
And those, I wanted to keep the superstar intact as much as I could, so that if anybody out there still had that and wanted to play, they could not just use our version, but they could use their original Adam Kreitz card that they got from way back when. So some of those were really engineered to try to build around that without altering the superstar, which is why Brainbusters were so odd and essentially Four Horsemen.
And why the Macho Cowboy hat gives +3 hand size, because the Kreitz card was a 5/5.
5/5, yeah. 8/5 felt better, but let's give it to him on the back end. Plus, that does have the added effect that if he gets knocked down back to 5 for, like, say, Armageddon is upon us, okay, then he can buy myself some time.
Yeah.
Very nice. Enjoy that. That's Adam had some cool stuff. I think I have a few of those cards laying around someplace that I never sent off to Mike for inventory purposes, just because it's nostalgia, kind of keeping around.
Oh,
kind of cool. I mean, I still have a couple somewhere back there. I still have some battle bags, and I think I keep them inside there. Those are pretty cool stuff. Yeah, I like those. And it's nice to see that you guys built a whole superstar based, support card with everything around it too, which is nice. I mean, how difficult were those to make for support wise? Because now you're running into imaging issues now.
Oh yes, picture issues. Anytime you try to move
yeah.
backwards, there's always going to be some level of picture issues. And people don't really get what we mean. They say, well, there's pictures of such and such on WWE.com. Yes, there's a picture of them standing there, and standing there, and standing there, and standing in the ring, and holding a title they won, and standing there, and standing there. They're not, that doesn't inspire somebody to build up, especially when you say, okay, let's make their moves. What pictures of their moves do we have?
None.
Yeah, or maybe he's doing a headlock. Ooh, do you really want to play, such and such's patented headlock? Come on.
Or just go, premieres like that. Use the same freaking pictures for, like the WrestleMania deck they made. Like same picture for the different moves.
Oh, yeah.
I was thinking of those bootleg. I think they were Chilean decks that were. Yeah.
And they had like some WCW guys in there.
Yeah.
I mean,
and that garish foiling. Jesus
Yeah.
Christ, those hurt my eyes just to look at.
I think I have a few of those lying around in storage. Those are
raw to the deal.
Raw to the deal. Those are great.
That's one of the reasons the knockoffs is kind of why we had to sort of have a moratorium on people making their own virtual cards. We've always said, please don't.
Yeah.
Just because there's people who don't get it right.
There's also people who can't read, but that's another issue.
I know you know what I'm talking about, but taunted by the cheating fans.
Yeah. How the fuck do the fans cheat? Are they just passing chairs to everybody?
Here you go, man. Hit them with this.
Hit them with this. That's a whole different topic, by the way, because the Chile market does their own thing.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, the card images they do down there, some good guys doing some great graphic work down there.
Yeah.
I've never tried to build a deck of theirs, so I have no idea how it plays. I think they're trying to be a little bit more true to the comic images type of stuff, as far as like keep it, not building anything new. Basically, there's kind of using the same card pool, but just a couple superstars. That's it.
Yeah, I've seen stuff where people have designed superstars that when you play this, draw a card, or you're this, or -2 fortitude. And I think that's great, but what else? What's going to motivate me to play that versus Mr. Pay-Per-View or whatever else? Okay, I draw a card. That's great. What else? And I'm not saying those guys are doing anything wrong, or anybody who makes these cards are doing anything bad. But what I'm saying is that Virtual aspires to be more. When I looked at the Buffy cards, the one thing I didn't like was how they were basically, because you build around superstars they're not called superstars. You
Sure.
build around specific people, and you can use other people in your deck. So Buffy can have Xander or whoever else in his deck, but you build a Buffy deck. So in that,
Sure.
it parallels to Raw Deal, where it's character driven.
Sure.
Basically, what they built is all new characters. So in season 4, you get such and such, maybe a different Buffy, or a new character from season 4, or a new character from season 5. But they didn't expand on the game mechanics. They were still running from those same 3 sets of, use this, this, or this. And that is absolutely something I wanted to move past with virtual, to not just balance, but to come up with new ideas and new reasons for people to go back and look at these old cards or play this other old thing or have a new approach. So later on, that's where we came up with drawing a blank. Hey, let's do something if you have a blank ability or you have blank maneuvers. Let's do something if you have these classic cards, which are just okay for everybody. But hey, if you're an old timer, they're great.
Or I could pat myself on the back for promo.
Yes, promo. God, that saves so much time. That encounter.
Yeah.
I know people sometimes trip on that. They're like, I'm still not sure what promo and counter are. It's like, trust me, you've gotten used to everything else.
The nice thing about promo is that you can sum it all up in a single sentence.
Yes.
It's a powerful keyword that does not require a lot of explanation.
Yeah.
But now I'm just wanking myself off because I wrote it. So
we tried to do that with something else.
Let me know if you want to continue. I can stop recording. So.
Were you going to switch to Pornhub or OnlyFans?
I don't know. Which one of you do you have an account with?
Neither.
Okay. Wink. This went completely left field really quick.
It did just a little bit.
I think we pretty much covered everything on Virtual 1. No, I mean, is there anything else that we left?
We can cover most of it. I mean, there's some smaller points like how we tried to support tag teams and stables and make those more of a thing and give them a role within the game instead of just, you can pack the tag team titles.
Wait a minute. Whoa. What's a stable? Because that keyword doesn't exist before Virtual.
Yeah, exactly. We're like, these are 5 guys on this card. You have right to censor. You have this many people. Why are they not a stable and opposed to just being a tag team? So we added handicap match numbers game, and later on found flurry of finishers is a great way to say, okay, you got 5 guys standing around the ring. Yeah, you're getting hit with more than one finisher.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
again, very small thing, very easy to explain to somebody. Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, you're stable. That means something when a card says it means something. But it gives a lot of design room.
We only had stables in this one. When did Allegiance come out?
3.
Virtual.
Or 3?
Yeah.
3, as I hold up 4 fingers. Yeah, 3. I'm dumb. Let's see. So.
No, you just got flair on the mind.
I do have flair on the mind.
Woo.
Yeah. Woo, yes.
The symbol of excellence.
Woo!
Thanks for trying to make my dumbness sound smart. Okay.
You're welcome.
That's cool. All right, guys. That was a lot of things to take in on Virtual 1. Because Virtual 1 was different. I mean, it brought a lot of different things to the tables like that. It was fun to see that it brought, I mean, who would have thought Bret Hart, Ultimate Warrior, all these legends.
The Blue Blazer.
The Blue Blazer, for Christ's sake. I mean, and then support cards for existing superstars too. That quite honestly needed it. It really balanced the field. It was fun to see different decks coming to tournaments in the local SoCal area than just the same, the Eugenes and Mr. Pay-Per-Views and like that all the time and Andre decks. It was nice to see. Oh shit, you're playing a Road Dogg deck. And you're playing and guys winning with those decks.
Yeah,
it was fun.
Probably the biggest compliment I've heard is when people would say the game is more balanced and more superstars are viable than when it was in print.
Absolutely,
100%. Warms my tiny little black heart.
It 100%. It was that's what I'm talking about here. It's just nice to see a wide variety of decks being played, because then you weren't seeing guys playing like, oh, you bought a Big Show deck, I got a Big Show deck, oh fuck it, all right. Now it's like there was a whole slew of new things coming out like that. Seeing Bret Hart going against the NWO, or it was just fun to watch. I really appreciate that. So my hat's off to you guys for making some really cool shit.
We did.
It was a pleasure. It was an honor, and man, it's been a lot of work.
Yeah.
Not to mention the maintenance after the fact when we realize, oh, there's a better way to do that. Oh, we should have done this. Oh, that's what.
Yeah, we both had a lot fewer gray hairs back then.
Yeah.
We don't want to talk about that. Yeah, you get your gray hairs from a card game. I get my gray hairs from a kid. So, tomato, tomato.
Your kid could eat my card game, probably.
Probably. Not. Yeah, we don't want to see that. Well, it's cool, guys. This was the first time live. It didn't got some comments here, like that, but nothing. Just people making some statements like that. Not a whole lot of questions here, but I got the one question out of the way from Instagram, anyways. I think that's it, man.
All right, man.
What do you guys want to? A little spoiler. We want to talk about next time.
I'm up for whatever. We can go to another virtual set and talk about how that came to be and some of the components of that, or we can go back and talk about. I don't think we talked about Unforgiven yet.
No, we have not.
Talk about Unforgiven yet.
Let's do Unforgiven next.
Yeah,
Sure.
let's do it.
Let's bounce back and forth because we got a lot of virtual stuff to cover too. And
we got a lot of stuff to cover. Period.
Period.
So,
yeah.
Let's do it.
Indeed.
So whenever you guys can work your schedules out, let's go ahead and talk about some Unforgiven,
Sounds good.
and then we'll do this again, guys.
Okay,
Sounds like
Tony,
a plan.
what's your big closing catchphrase? Let's hear it.
I don't have a closing catchphrase. I don't know. Deck up, guys.
Sure.
I don't know. Fuck. VelaCards. No. I don't know. I'll figure something out. Why? What's yours? Come on, put me on the spot.
My finishing line when I was writing fantasy wrestling was always, and that's the end of the line.
Okay. And you, Mr. Nate?
Fuck off.
I like his catchphrase. His catchphrase works. That's a great 2020 slogan.
2020.
Yeah, fuck off. Yeah, I like it. All right, guys. We'll do this again hopefully soon.
Sounds good.
You guys let me know what your schedule is and we'll do it.
Yep, we'll work it out.
So we'll work it out, guys.
Until